Hello, and welcome back to the lab. Today is part 3 of our series on tithing called,
The tithe is wrong.
I wanted to say it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eve.
Okay, I forgive you, Adam.
Thank you.
So let's begin. Malachi chapter 3, and the Mosaic Law are our focus today. The tithe teaching of today demands a payment of 10% of one's income or wages, and uses Malachi chapter 3 as proof. But consider this. The Mosaic tithe were always edible and from the crops and flocks. Malachi 3 says, "Bring all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house." Meat is a very specific thing, in that it means something edible. In the Hebrew, the word is teref, meaning something torn, that is, a fragment. For example, a fresh leaf, pare, or food.
Secondly, the teaching which states that everybody in the Old Testament was required to begin their giving to God at the 10% level is false. The poor were not required to tithe at all. Neither did the tithe come from the results of man's craft, hands and skill. Only farmers and herdsmen gathered what God produced as tithe increase.
Please note the implication here, beloved. Jesus was a carpenter. Paul was a tent maker, and Peter was a fisherman. None of these occupations qualified as tithe payers because they did not farm or herd animals for a living. It is, therefore, incorrect to teach that everybody paid a required minimum of a tithe, and, therefore, incorrect to teach that in keeping with the law, New Covenant Christians should be required to at least begin at the same minimum as Old Covenant Israelites.
So true, Eve. This common false assumption is very often repeated and completely ignores the very plain definition of tithe as food gathered from farm increase or herd increase. The easy argument to make here is that being that we are no longer in a primarily agricultural society, we give money instead of food. But if we are honest with the text, how do we decide who is to tithe?
Did you know that there are 3 different tithe in the Bible? That's right, there are 3 different tithe described in the Bible. The first religious tithe, called the Levitical tithe, had 2 parts. The whole first tithe was given to the Levites, who were only servants to the priests. This is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 18, verses 21 through 24, and in Nehemiah 10 verse 37. The Levites, in turn, gave 1/10 of the whole tithe to the priests. This is found in Numbers 18 verses 25 through 28, Nehemiah 10 verse 38.
That's right, Eve. According to Deuteronomy chapters 12 and 14, the second religious tithe, called the feast tithe, was eaten by worshippers in the streets of Jerusalem during the 3 yearly festivals. The third tithe, according to Deuteronomy chapters 14 and 26, called the poor tithe, was kept in the homes every 3rd year to feed the poor.
Also, according to 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 14 through 17, the ruler collected the first and best 10% for political use. During Jesus' time, Rome collected the first 10% of most food and 20% of fruit crops as its spoils of war. So the only logical conclusion one can draw is that the current tithe teaching ignores all other tithe and focuses on an incorrect interpretation of the first religious tithe.
Right you are, Eve. I think that's enough for now. Let's give them some time to think it over.
Okay, Adam. Join us in part 4, where we contrast the Christian and the law-abiding Jew. And Adam?
Yes, Eve?
Please remember to turn the camera off.
Ha 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 ha.
Ha ha ha.